My wife has recently become distant and secretive, especially after a new supervisor joined her workplace. I strongly suspect she might be cheating on me. I'm a 32-year-old man, and my wife, who's 28, and I have been together for 7 years. When we first started dating, everything was incredible. She was my soulmate, and I truly believed I was hers. We had so much in common: sports, entertainment, social issues, more on that later, and even our favorite vacation spots. We were genuinely happy for several years. However, something started to change. She began pulling away, becoming more emotionally distant, almost colder. Let me give you a little more background. We were together for 5 years without any issues. Those were wonderful years. She made me feel like I was her world, just as she was mine. We used to hang out with friends, and I would catch her smiling at me with such affection while we all chatted. She took care of me whenever I was sick, just like I took care of her. She was always there for me, my solid foundation, my best friend, my one and only. We did everything together: hiking, camping, wildlife excursions, watching football. We shared a passion for each other that was unmatched. I never wanted her to change. She was perfect to me. I fell for her right away. This beautiful brunette with curly hair, an unforgettable smile, and such kindness in her eyes. She always made me feel like I was someone special, never once making me feel insecure or inadequate. And she always told me she felt the same about me. But as I mentioned earlier, things were great for more than 5 years, until her new supervisor, who I'll call Maris, joined her workplace. He's 30. At first, my wife would come home and talk about Maris a lot. She said he was funny and made everyone feel good. To be honest, I was a bit surprised, as she would usually come home and start by asking about my day. This time, she dove straight into talking about Maris. Still, I brushed it off. He was new, and I figured it was exciting for her to have some fresh company after seeing the same people at work for so long. Weeks passed, and my wife grew more distant and started acting secretive. She began going out for work nights more often, but I wasn't really bothered at first, since she'd been to work outings before. However, something happened that made me feel uneasy. We were supposed to visit a mutual friend for drinks, our friend Daniel, who'd recently been diagnosed with a serious illness. Normally, my wife is empathetic and supportive. She's like a rock, someone people can rely on. So, when we heard about Daniel, we didn't hesitate to offer support and plan to visit him. The night we were supposed to go, my wife was late because she was out with her work friends. I called her a few times, but got no answer. I texted her, but she didn't reply either. After waiting a while, I decided to head over to Daniel's on my own. We talked about how he was coping, and I truly felt for him. Such a kind guy having to go through something so cruel. I spent some time with him, and afterward, I went home, growing more and more upset. My wife still wasn't home, and there were no missed calls or texts from her. I started to worry that maybe she'd been in an accident. I ended up calling her colleague Jane, who I knew, to ask if my wife was still with her. Jane said that my wife was out, but she herself had already gone home, and only Maris and my wife were still out. I was furious. We had known Daniel for years, and here she was, skipping out on him for a guy she'd only recently met. I kept trying to reason with myself, thinking there had to be an explanation for her actions. When she eventually got home, she saw me waiting for her in the living room. She asked if everything was okay, and I simply looked at her and said, "Daniel." She looked shocked and apologized, saying she had lost track of time while out with her coworkers. She seemed genuinely sorry, and since I knew she cared about Daniel, I thought maybe she really had just forgotten. So I asked her who was out with her, and she mentioned the usual people, Jane, Sophie, and others. I asked, "What about Maris?" She added that he was there too. I pressed further, asking if everyone stayed until the end. She said yes. The next day, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I couldn't understand how she could lie to me. She'd never lied to me before. It was also unlike her to let down someone in need, like Daniel. I thought maybe she was overwhelmed with work, but her behavior only got stranger. She continued coming home late, and her affection toward me had dwindled. She was constantly on her phone, and I finally asked her who she was always texting. She simply said, A friend from work. I asked if it was Maris. She responded defensively. No, but what's the problem if it is? Her defensiveness caught me off guard. I was honest with her and said, the problem is that you never stop talking about him. He's been working with you for barely a month, and you seem to be obsessed with him. You light up when you mention him, so much so that you forgot about Daniel. I could tell I'd struck a nerve. She denied idolizing Maris, saying he was just a friend and that she'd already apologized to Daniel. But it wasn't enough for me. One night, when she was asleep, I checked her phone. And I found what I feared, messages between her and Maris, full of flirtation and emotional connection. I took photos of their conversation, keeping it for later. Days passed, and nothing changed, the late nights, the distance between us. I confided in a friend about my suspicions, and he said maybe I was just being paranoid. He suggested I do something special for her, like make a surprise dinner. I thought it was a good idea, so I texted her, asking if she had plans after work. She said she was free, and we had a nice exchange of messages. I decided to go all out. I made dinner, bought a nice bottle of wine, and even got her flowers. But when she got home, she looked sad and told me she was really sorry, but she had to go to a surprise birthday party for a colleague, and it was the only night they could do it. I shook my head in frustration, feeling defeated. She left almost immediately after, and that was the breaking point for me. After all these months of feeling suspicious, I needed solid proof. I wasn't proud of what I did next. I put a tracker in her car. I pretended to work late, so she wouldn't know I was home. When she arrived, I watched her leave again shortly after, driving further out of town. I followed her to a secluded car park, and she pulled up next to another car, Maris' car. She got out and climbed into his car. It was obvious what was happening. I took a video of her getting into his car, so I would have evidence. In the days that followed, she acted as though nothing had happened. She was cheerful again, smiling at me, even holding my hand during breakfast. She had no idea that I knew. One day, I was off work and decided to check her laptop for any clues. I didn't find anything, but while searching through her drawers, I found an iPad that wasn't mine. I guessed it was something she'd bought without telling me. Luckily for me, it wasn't locked. When I opened it, I looked for text conversations, but didn't find anything. But then, I discovered a folder full of explicit photos, images of my wife posing naked, making provocative gestures for Maris. There were so many. And then, there were videos. I know I shouldn't have watched them, but I did. They were graphic, videos of Maris having sex with my wife, and my wife seeming to enjoy it. But there was more. There were videos of her with another woman and another man, with Maris there as well. And the other man made me sick. He had tattoos of symbols associated with hate groups, symbols that I knew my wife despised. I couldn't comprehend it. My wife, who detested any form of bigotry, was with someone like him. It was clear that Maris shared his views. I couldn't believe that she would stoop to this level. Seeing her actively participate in something she supposedly stood against hurt me deeply. Throughout our marriage, we had discussed fantasies, but we never acted on them. I had once mentioned wanting to experiment with a threesome, but my wife had said she wasn't comfortable with that, and I completely respected her decision. I loved her enough not to push it. So to see her doing things she said she would never do, with other people, crushed me. I watched all the videos, even though I knew I shouldn't have. I copied the videos and pictures to my laptop for evidence, because I needed proof. I had made up my mind. I wanted her out of my life. But despite everything, I still couldn't understand why she had done it. What did Maris have that I didn't? Why would she be with a man whose values she despised? I talked to Daniel about it. He was shocked and disgusted by what I told him, but he supported my decision to divorce her. He told me that confronting her and Maris was pointless. She'd already made her choice. He encouraged me to move on and find someone genuine, someone who was real, unlike the person my wife had become. For months, I had felt powerless. I was scared to confront the truth, afraid of what I would find. I didn't want to confront her more directly when I was suspicious because I feared what it would mean for us. But after seeing those videos, I knew exactly what I had to do. I contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process. I was done. During the 3 weeks it took for the papers to be processed, I tried my best to act normal, even though she continued to behave as if everything was fine. She still went out late, most likely with Maris, and I didn't care anymore. When the divorce papers came through, I packed up my belongings while she was at work. I left the papers on the kitchen table with my wedding ring, and I moved out. I stayed with an old friend from university, Adam, who lived in a different city. I was grateful to him, but even more so because it put distance between me and my wife, our home, and everything we shared. I told my parents what had happened, though I left out most of the details. They were shocked but supportive of my decision. And all I could think was that I was finally free. I assumed my wife would be happy too, since it was clear that Maris was the one she wanted. I hoped the divorce would go smoothly. But that night, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts from my wife. I was honestly surprised. I had expected her to be glad, but clearly I was wrong. I didn't answer her calls, but I read her texts, which were full of apologies and pleas for us to talk. This went on for hours. Eventually, I blocked her number and deleted all my social media. I kept one line of communication open, email, so we could finalize the divorce. She emailed me again, apologizing repeatedly and saying that we needed to talk. I replied, saying I only wanted the divorce. She responded, saying she didn't want a divorce, that I was the only man she loved, and that Maris had meant nothing to her. It was almost funny. I'd never told her why I left, but she clearly knew. Seeing her plead for forgiveness brought me some sense of satisfaction. Adam told me I could stay as long as I wanted, and I appreciated that. But he also said that eventually I would have to confront her. He believed that I couldn't truly move on until I got some answers, no matter how much I thought I could just walk away. Deep down, I disagreed. Why should I talk to her? She had shown no regard for my feelings for months. She didn't care about me, about our sick friend Daniel, about anyone but herself. So why should I care about what she had to say now? I knew I was being stubborn, and I was angry that she was trying to reconcile. I genuinely thought she would sign the papers and move on with Maris. And yet, here she was, pleading for a second chance. I even started seeing a therapist, who helped me work through everything. I shared the whole story, the affair, the photos, the videos. I told her about my wife's attempts to reconcile, and she was blunt with me. She said that by leaving without an explanation, I probably wanted my wife to feel the pain of uncertainty, to make her suffer like she'd made me suffer. She also told me that if I decided to meet my wife, I needed to be prepared to ask the hard questions, even if the answers were painful. She was right. Meeting my wife would mean losing some of the control I'd regained. 2 days later, my wife made it clear she wanted to meet. She hinted that she wouldn't sign the divorce papers until we did. I talked to my parents and my close friends. My dad said I could force her to sign, but that could take months. He thought it might be better to talk to her and see if she would sign afterward. Adam agreed. So I decided to meet her, though to say I was nervous would be an understatement. I apologized for how long it took me to update. Life got in the way, but I wanted to thank everyone for their advice and support. It meant a lot to me, and I read every single comment. It was overwhelming, and I truly appreciate it. After much thought, I moved back to the area where we had lived together. Living with Adam had been great, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. My soon-to-be ex-wife was still in our rented house, so I found a flat just outside of town. I made it clear to my wife that I was coming back, and she seemed happy, but I told her I wasn't moving back in with her. She tried to convince me that we could just sleep in separate rooms, but I wasn't interested. I also refused to tell her where I was living, though she tried to find out. We set a time and place to meet, somewhere neutral, a beach where there were people but not too many. I wanted to meet outside, just the two of us. Some of you had suggested bringing a friend, but I felt that wasn't necessary. I did, however, plan to record the conversation, and I made sure to do that. Before the meeting, I emailed her with a set of rules she needed to follow if she wanted any chance of reconciliation. The rules were simple. Answer every question honestly. No vague responses like, "It just happened." I wanted detailed answers. If she walked away before answering everything, it was over. I also told her to be on time. If she was late, it would be over too. The day of the meeting, I was a wreck. I had been nervous before, but now I felt almost paralyzed with anxiety. Not because I wanted her back, but because I knew seeing her would make everything come rushing back. I arrived early and took in the surroundings. It was a perfect day, the sun shining, people strolling along the beach. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her approaching. She was smiling, looking as though she had put effort into her appearance, though she seemed worn out and stressed. I felt no sympathy. She tried to hug me, but I put my hand up, signaling her to stop. She looked at me with an expression of understanding. We sat down, and she tried to make small talk, but I wasn't interested. I had my phone recording, and I got straight to the point. "When did you first kiss him?" she replied. "The first week on Friday." I asked. "When did you first sleep with him?" she said. "The same day, Friday." "Where?" I asked. She said it was at his place. I then asked, "Did you ever do it in our bed?" She hesitated, but I reminded her of the rules. Tears started to form as she said yes. She told me it happened several times when I was out. I asked her if our neighbors had seen him, and she said they had but assumed he was just a work colleague. She apologized, but I motioned for her to stop. I continued with more questions. I asked if she'd told Maris about me, if he'd known she was married. She said he knew, but that things were blurry at the time. My therapist had suggested I ask her a specific question. "When you first met Maris, how early did he ask about me?" She looked confused, so I explained. "Did he ask if you were married, if we were happy, that kind of thing?" She paused, then admitted that he had asked about our marriage and whether we were happy. I pressed her. "Didn't that seem odd to you? You barely knew him, and he was already asking personal questions about your marriage." She shrugged, saying she hadn't thought it was weird at the time, just casual curiosity. After asking some more straightforward questions, I decided to bring up the videos and photos. I did it indirectly, mentioning a recent incident involving a racist attack at a local store. I told her about bigots vandalizing a shop and spraying hateful graffiti. She said it was awful. I looked at her and said, "I can't stand racists, can you?" She seemed confused at first, but then realization dawned. She started to cry, and I let her cry for a few minutes before pressing on. "Why would you even associate with people like that?" I asked. She struggled to answer but eventually said, "It's not what it looks like." I didn't accept that answer. I asked her why she would betray everything she believed in, her values, her friends, me, for someone like Maris. She started shaking, tears streaming down her face. She explained that Maris had been the new boss in her department, that he was charming, confident, and made everyone feel special. She said many women at the office were drawn to him, but when he started focusing on her, she felt like he had chosen her. I asked her to explain what she meant by that. She admitted that she felt flattered by his attention. He made her feel unique, like she was the only one he wanted, and that made her feel good. She said it was pathetic, but she was being honest. When he looked at her across the office, she felt excited. I asked why she would throw everything away for someone like that. She admitted she was weak, and that she got a thrill from it. She knew other women wanted Maris, but he chose her, and that made her feel powerful. She went on, saying that Maris began to demand more and more from her. He wanted her to step out of her comfort zone, to do things she had previously said she'd never do. She knew his friend was a racist, and that Maris shared his views, but she was afraid to challenge him. She didn't want to lose his approval. He made her feel like she was lucky to have him, and she felt she couldn't lose his approval. He made her feel like she was lucky to have him, and she felt she couldn't disappoint him. I panicked. I went to great lengths to make him happy, obsessed with his happiness as if nothing else mattered. I found myself willing to do anything just to keep him satisfied. "You saw it all, didn't you?" I said to her. "Of course I did," she responded. "And about the I know, but like I told you, he was like a drug I just couldn't quit. The more time I spent with him, the more I craved him. He made me believe that you were the problem. He made me think that you were holding me back and disrespecting me. Deep down, I know none of that is true." She started crying again. "But that's why I did everything he told me to do. Even when he talked badly about you, I couldn't defend you because I was addicted to him. And that excuses the way you treated me? Blowing off dinner plans, canceling camping trips, over and over again? I shot back. She shook her head, her face full of regret. No, it doesn't. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I know I was awful to you, and I don't think I'll ever be able to forgive myself for it. I knew I was hurting you every time I bailed on plans, but I couldn't stop. He kept telling me I deserved more than you, that I should be treated like a queen. Every time he took me to fancy restaurants, VIP shows, or gave me expensive gifts, I grew more resentful of you. He always pointed out your shortcomings, and I ended up believing him. That's why I treated you so coldly. I thought you were failing me, and he wasn't. Even though I know now that wasn't true, back then, he was so persuasive, and I fell for it all. She went on. When I saw the papers and the ring, it was like a switch flipped in my mind. I know you might not believe me, but I broke things off with Marju immediately after that. I know I don't deserve any credit for it, but I genuinely feel ashamed of what happened. I can't imagine what it was like for you. I know I neglected you, made you feel worthless, but I couldn't see it until after I saw those papers. I'm so ashamed I chose that horrible man over you. I looked at her, not expecting these answers, but she seemed sincere. Besides the affair, you know what else bothers me? In the beginning, you said you wanted the affair because he chose you. You said he was like a drug, but so many people overcome addictions. They recognize they need help and do something about it. You didn't. You kept going. The only reason you're here now is because I was your safety net, and now that's gone. How could anyone say I love you to their partner while making them feel so worthless? She claimed she never intended to make me feel that way. No, I said firmly. But you did. For almost a year, you made me feel like I was nothing. You know what that did to me. I was overeating, withdrawing from everyone, losing myself, while you were out living your best life, buying new clothes, hitting the gym, and becoming someone else. Every time you looked at me, there was disgust in your eyes. You wouldn't let me touch you. You wouldn't give me anything but disdain. Abuse? She asked, looking startled. Yes, I said. You abused me mentally. Maybe you didn't realize it, but you did. The person who I thought was my best friend, my soulmate, made me hate myself. She started crying again. It got so bad that I was even thinking of. I trailed off, but she understood. She was crying heavily now, apologizing repeatedly, while I noticed people were starting to watch us from the beachfront. I had to remind her to take deep breaths and calm down. She pulled herself together, still pleading with me. She kept saying it was all because he filled her head with toxic thoughts about me. I had one last question. Do you love him? No, I don't, she said, her voice shaky. I know you probably won't believe me, but I actually hate him just as much as I hate myself. After a few hours of talking, she left, insisting that everything she said was true, that I was the love of her life and more. I sat by the beach afterward thinking about whether she was groomed or conditioned. It made sense. Everything about her changed after she met him. There was a reason why my therapist asked certain questions. While she couldn't diagnose Marju, she said it seemed likely he had sociopathic tendencies. It explained why he was asking about our marriage early on. He had an agenda. He saw us happy and solid, and he wanted to tear that apart to cause chaos. Sociopaths do that. Marju would never have gone for a single woman. There was no thrill in it. But with my wife, he wasn't just controlling her. He was manipulating me, our family, and her friends too. He twisted her into someone completely different, into someone that my wife never wanted to be. He used her to turn me into a broken, isolated man. She continued to do his bidding, unknowingly helping him in his game. He manipulated her, and through her, he crushed me. Sociopaths love control. When I followed my wife to the parking lot, Marja probably anticipated it. If I had confronted them there, she would have taken his side right in front of me. He wanted to win that way. Sociopaths thrive on seeing others suffer without an ounce of remorse. Could it be true? Was my wife really a victim of a sociopath? It fit. But a part of me didn't care, while another part of me cared deeply. Who was this guy? How could one person enter someone's life and completely destroy it with such precision? He was attractive, confident, and successful. He seemed to have it all. Maybe my soon-to-be ex was right when she said she ended it with him the day I walked away. After I left, my neighbor mentioned that Margie kept showing up at our house, demanding to speak with my soon-to-be ex. He wouldn't leave her alone. She told me he acted like an abusive partner, and I guess that fits. My therapist said sociopaths can't handle rejection, especially when they lose control. She chose to end things with him, and it made him spiral. Why? It was simple. My wife chose me over him. Despite everything he put her through, she ended it with him. That had to have thrown a wrench in his plans. Update: I reached out to HR regarding my wife and him. Turns out I wasn't the only one. Others had complained as well. The news of their affair spread around. Margie left shortly after my wife and I spoke. I have no idea where he is now, nor do I care. My wife also left her job before they could push her out. Apparently, people there weren't happy with her either, including her parents. She's staying with them now, and they're helping her get therapy, which she definitely needs. I'm still in contact with her family and some friends. They've tried convincing me to talk to her again, but I can't. She needs to focus on healing, on getting herself better. The divorce will be finalized soon. Some people doubted she'd sign the papers after our meeting, but I had to see her. I needed answers. Did I feel better afterward? In some ways, yes. She was honest with me, as much as she could be. The whole pattern of the affair made sense in a twisted way. She even asked if there was a chance for reconciliation. I have to admit, it crossed my mind. Even if she was manipulated, how could I trust her again? If we got back together, all I'd think about is him, and how I could never match up. I'd always feel second best, regardless of what she said. She might call me her soulmate, but things would never be the same between us. I think the takeaway here is that cheating is never okay. It destroys the person who's been betrayed. Cheaters are selfish and only come clean when they get caught, or when divorce papers hit the table. I doubt I'll marry again. The pain from the affair runs too deep. I still feel inadequate, like I'll never be enough. Even though I've started going back to the gym, hiking, and camping with friends, staying active and trying to move on, I can't shake this anger. I hate her for falling for him so easily, for letting herself be his choice. Why her? Why did it have to be her? These questions haunt me, even though I know they're pointless now. What's done is done, and the damage still lingers. I still have my job. Moving to the outskirts of town has been a good change. I'm not someone who's going to run thousands of miles away, even though I understand why people do it. My work and my social circle have been supportive, and I don't want to lose that. If I left entirely, it'd feel like I was letting them win. My therapist keeps reminding me that healing takes time, that I need to be patient. And that's where I'm at. I appreciate all of your comments, and I've taken them to heart. Update 3. I know it's been a while since I last posted. Thank you to everyone who reached out to me. I'm sorry I couldn't get back to all of you. Things have been chaotic, but I hope you understand. A lot has happened, and it's only fair that I give you some closure. First, I want to clear up 2 things. 1. I saw a lot of comments doubting my story because I initially didn't think the texts were proof. I knew my wife was cheating, but my friend said it was probably nothing, that digital flirting wasn't really cheating. I took his word for it. Plus, I didn't want to face what was happening. 2. I asked for feedback about meeting my wife because I wanted validation that I did the right thing. I'd already met her, but wanted to know if others thought it was a good idea. Sorry if that wasn't clear. As I mentioned earlier, the story has come to an end for me, but here's how it concludes. After meeting my wife at the beach, I was emotionally drained. She's still trying to reach out, but I'm struggling to process everything. I continue seeing my therapist, and my wife is now seeing a psychologist at a private hospital. Her parents are paying for it. I found out when I ran into her parents while hiking alone. I was walking through a shallow stream when I heard someone call my name. It was her parents. I was nervous seeing them, especially after meeting their daughter. I wondered if she'd lied about me or talked badly about me. But to my surprise, they didn't hold anything against me. Her mother hugged me, and her father shook my hand. They apologized for everything, but I told them they had nothing to apologize for. Her mother suggested we sit and talk, so we found a bench nearby. Her mom spoke first, telling me that my wife was committed to seeing a psychologist. I've known her parents for years, and they've never lied to me. I trust them. They explained their side of things with Marju. Apparently, my wife wasn't just awful to me but to them as well. Before Marju, my wife loved drawing. It was a passion she shared with her mom. They had a little drawing group that met regularly, and she loved being part of it. But after Marju came into her life, she just stopped going. No explanation. When her mom called to check on her, she was defensive and rude, even swearing at her. My wife hardly ever swore, but she did then. She said things like, "I don't care about that stupid group. It's pathetic, just like you." Her parents said this behavior wasn't isolated. They tried to talk to her about it, but she lashed out at them every time. They assumed it was because of issues between us, not because of an affair. It wasn't until after I left that she called them and confessed everything: the affair, what she did, how Marju manipulated her. Her parents were horrified and disgusted. Her father berated her so much that she had a panic attack. To them, this was completely out of character for their daughter. She wasn't someone who cheated, lied, or hurt others. This brought me back to my therapist's theory that my wife had been groomed by a sociopath. Me: so my wife was a victim of a psychopath. Therapist: not a psychopath, a sociopath. Me: what's the difference? I felt embarrassed for not knowing. Therapist: psychopaths adapt their personality to fit in socially. If they need someone outgoing, they become that person. Sociopaths don't change themselves, they change the people around them. They shape others into vile versions of themselves. Me: that actually makes sense. Therapist continued: Marju was clearly doing this with your wife. He made her talk to her parents disrespectfully, and he even chose manipulative videos for her to watch. Me: but how could someone have such control over another person? Are you saying my wife was a victim? Therapist: yes, it may sound strange, but people with sociopathic tendencies can be extremely influential, especially with someone they want to control. Back to the conversation with her parents. Her mom told me my wife was in therapy, and I could see the strain, but also relief in their faces. Relief that she was finally getting help. A few weeks later, her mom reached out to me. We had been in contact during those weeks, and she said my wife wanted me to join her for some therapy sessions to help her understand what had happened. I asked myself if I should do it. After all, she had agreed to sign the divorce papers after we met, but something didn't feel right. In the end, I agreed. After a few sessions, her psychologist spoke with both me and her mom. My wife was waiting outside. The psychologist was direct, but her soft Irish accent softened the blow. The psychologist said, "Your daughter is suffering from PTSD. The relationship with Marju was abusive, grooming and controlling her from the start." I interrupted. "She got with him in the first week. That doesn't sound like someone fighting for me." I knew I sounded rude, and her mom shot me a look that said, "Shut up and listen." The psychologist continued, "As I was saying, Marja seemed perfect. We all have an ideal image in our heads, and Marja fit that image, not just for your wife, but for others too. I understand it's hard." She looked at me. "But your wife was honest. He chose her. This seemingly perfect man chose her." I replied, "So she just forgot she was married?" She raised her hand. "I'm not excusing her actions. Yes, she found him attractive, but his manipulation went beyond that. He spent almost a year conditioning her, convincing her that he was perfect and that you were not. This is why she mentally abused you. It was him pulling the strings." After the session, we saw my wife in the lobby. She looked up, smiling shyly. I looked at her, and a part of me wanted to hate her, to make her feel the pain I had felt, to get revenge. But those emotions didn't come. Why? Because time had passed, and I knew there was something else I needed to do. Last year, I went to a place I will go to every year, Daniel's grave. Daniel passed away some time ago, and at the funeral, I saw my wife struggling. Daniel and my wife had known each other since they were kids. I remember Daniel talking to my wife after the affair came out. She apologized, and he forgave her. Now, I come to his grave, not saying anything, just sitting quietly. Then, I noticed my wife sitting next to me. She started crying, and I looked at her. I had thought about shutting her out so many times, being cold, but I couldn't. Today wasn't about us, it was about Daniel. So, for the first time in a long time, I hugged her. Time went on. I continued therapy, and my wife kept seeing her psychologist. I was sitting in a coffee shop, just looking at people, watching them smile and laugh. It made me smile. "Here's your cranberry juice," my wife said, sitting down across from me. We'd been talking for weeks, nothing romantic, just getting to know each other again. We had agreed to meet by the lake because she wanted to tell me something. Now, I was wondering what it was. Was Marge back? Was something wrong? I arrived first, and within 5 minutes she was there. I immediately asked, "Is everything okay?" She laughed and reassured me. "Everything's fine." She handed me a box. "What is it?" I asked. "Just open it," she said, smiling. I opened it, and inside was a crest of my family. I looked at her, pleasantly surprised. "Happy anniversary," she said. After all this time, she remembered. She knew how much family heirlooms meant to me. But that wasn't all. She handed me another box. I opened the second box, and inside was a photo album filled with memories of us. Pictures of us with Daniel, our families, and the times when we were truly happy. I felt my emotions on the verge of breaking. She gently placed her hand on my shoulder and said, "This isn't some weak attempt to win you back. I bought these because I know how much they mean to you, and if it's important to you, it's important to me. I know there's been so much pain, but I need you to know that I love you. I always have, and I always will." I looked at her, unsure of what to say or do. She didn't wait for a response. She just smiled, that beautiful smile she's always had, and walked away. I watched her as she left, and I couldn't help but smile too. Now, I'm walking along the beach. The day is beautiful, the sun shining just right. I get us some fish and chips, and we sit on the rocks, staring out at the sea. We talk, and we talk more. We talk about our day, about random things, about me, and about her and Marju. It feels like we're connecting again. Later, I sit across from the psychologist as she leans in toward me, her eyes serious. "There is no Marju anymore," she says. "Your wife has removed him from her life. She's made it clear that she wants to reconcile with you. This isn't about Marja now, it's about you. After months of observing your wife, I can confidently say he'll never be a threat again," she continued, her gaze steady. "I get why you're skeptical, I really do, but you wouldn't be here talking about this if you didn't still have feelings for her. The only question left is whether you're going to follow what feels right, or let him win by walking away." My therapist told me something similar. Back then, during those 11 months, the pain was too much to handle. But they say time heals all wounds, and with time, I feel like I've gotten to know my wife again. After we finish our food, we walk slowly along the beach. And then I do something I haven't done in ages. I reach out and hold her hand. Tears fill her eyes as she looks at me. I stop, and for the first time in forever, I really see her. Not the person she had become in those dark months, but my wife, the woman I love. And with that, I pull her into my arms and embrace her. Update 4. I've had so many messages from people asking for an update. First of all, thank you to everyone who showed concern and offered support. However, I never realized just how judgmental Reddit can be. I've had people wishing horrible things upon me and my wife, words too harsh to even repeat. I guess my decision to give our marriage another chance is seen as something deserving of condemnation. But I want to thank those who supported me as well. The therapy consultation between us isn't happening, not because my wife refused, but because she's nearing the end of her therapy. In simple terms, her journey is almost over. What's left are just a few closure sessions. Those are still happening. I've also had a lot of people asking about Marju. In my previous posts, I mentioned that he disappeared after the affair came to light. Well, I later found out that wasn't entirely true. He did, in fact, try to contact my wife when she was working on getting back with me. Before anyone jumps to conclusions, let me explain what happened. Marju went off the grid for a while, but continued trying to call my wife, text her, FaceTime her, even show up at our house. He did this repeatedly. My wife blocked him on every platform, and it seemed to work for a while, as he eventually stopped reaching out. During that time, she focused on repairing her relationship with her family and with me. But one day, her phone rang. The caller ID was unknown. She answered, and it was him, Marju. My wife was with her mom, her sister, and her mom's friends. Once they realized who it was, she put the call on speaker. She didn't leave the room or try to hide anything. She faced him with everyone there. I won't bore you with all the details of their conversation, but Marju was basically begging to see her. My wife decided to meet him, but it wasn't for closure in a romantic way. It was to end that chapter once and for all. She picked a public place, Fountain Park, so there'd be people around. She also wanted someone close by in case things went wrong. Marju knows what I look like, but he didn't know her friend Bree and her boyfriend, Tor, who were there for support. Tor is a tall, strong guy, a typical Swedish build like Dolph Lundgren. He was there to ensure my wife's safety. Now, you might be wondering why she didn't tell me about the meeting. Well, at the time, my wife and her mom didn't want to risk jeopardizing our potential reconciliation. They wanted this meeting to be the end, not something romantic. How do I know it wasn't romantic? My wife recorded the whole thing, and Bree and Tor were there, both of whom I trust. Here are some key moments from their conversation. Bree and Tor sat on a bench near my wife and Marju. Marju. Hello, he started, trying to engage in small talk. Wife. What do you want, Marju? Marju. I want you to explain yourself. Wife. Explain myself? Marju. Yes, after everything we've been through, after all I've done for you, why did you abandon us? Wife. That's easy. Because I never loved you. I feel nothing but embarrassment and shame for ruining my life for you. Marju. Stop overreacting. I gave you a life that your husband never could. Did he treat you well? No, he didn't. No one did except me. You're acting like a child. Wife. You didn't give me anything but shame. This was never about us. It was always about my husband and my family. Marju. No, it was about us, about you and me. Wife. No, it wasn't. You were obsessed with my husband and my family. You wanted to know everything about them, and then you immediately criticized them. You said they were wrong for me, but the truth is, you were the one who was wrong. Marju. Stop acting childish. I don't recall you complaining when I bought you gifts. You loved it, so just say thank you. Wife. Thank you? For what? For the pleasure you got from seeing me disrespect my husband? You loved hearing me say hurtful things to him, and you made me do it to my family too. You always demanded a report of everything I said and did. Her voice started to shake. Marju laughed. I'm supposed to apologize for your husband being pathetic? He and your family were holding you back, and that's the truth. You loved everything I gave you. You embraced me, and I made you realize your world was holding you down. I'm willing to forgive you, and we can build a real life together. Wife laughed back. You're right. I did smile when I got those gifts, but I was never happy with you. You were good at making me believe you were perfect, but you're just a pathetic man. Why do you think I ended things when I saw the divorce papers? Because there was no competition between you and my husband. He's a better man than you in every way, a kind, loving, genuine person. You, Marju, are vile. Marju. You're just ungrateful. The weekends away, the fancy dinners, the shows, I gave you those. I introduced you to a better life, a real life. I built your confidence, made you strong, and now you're disrespecting me. Wife. No, I'm seeing things clearly for the first time. All those things you gave me were superficial. I didn't realize it then, but what kind of man supports white nationalism? What kind of man thinks it's okay to hit women for no reason? And what kind of man tries to stop someone from going to their best friend's funeral? She paused, taking a deep breath. You are not a man. You're just a bully and a coward. I'm disgusted with myself for getting involved with you, but I have to live with my mistakes, and that's what you are, a mistake. You can threaten me all you want with those videos and pictures. I don't care. I've already punished myself for everything you made me do. This is the last time we'll speak. If you try to contact me again, I will go to the police. Consider this your final warning. Goodbye." She stood up to leave, and Marja tried to grab her, but Tor stepped in. Marja took one look at Tor and backed off, walking away. That was the last time she or anyone else saw him. I found out about this later. My wife and her mom didn't want anything to jeopardize our chance of reconciliation. When I heard the story, I felt my heart drop, but after speaking to Tor, Bree, and her mom, I understood why she had met with Marju. Both her psychologist and my therapist said it was about taking back control from him. It's clear from talking to her psychologist and family that during the affair, my wife was completely submissive to Marju. He controlled every aspect of her life, and this meeting was about regaining power over herself. Another question people have asked me is, what if someone like Marja comes along again? That's something I've asked myself countless times. But after everything, and being on this path to reconciliation, I've chosen not to give in to fear. I believe my marriage is worth saving. I know people on Reddit will criticize me, but I don't care. I do, however, value the constructive feedback, whether it's supportive or critical. Of course, there is a risk, but it's one worth taking because I love her. I always have. For the first time in a long time, I feel happiness again. We're doing the things we used to love. We're reconnecting with our families. It's a journey we're taking together. Another question I get is, does my wife accept what she did? For her, it's going to be a long road. She accepts full responsibility for everything that happened. If anyone tries to shift all the blame onto Marju, she disagrees completely. She still carries guilt, shame, and regret. She's still in therapy and making progress, but it's a long path, a path we're both walking with our families. I don't regret my decision to reconcile. I understand the trend on Reddit is to encourage leaving and seeking revenge. I get it, I truly do. But after all the pain, anger, and hurt, there comes a point where you have to make a choice. Stay or leave. I chose to stay, not because I'm weak or afraid, but because my marriage is worth fighting for. Edit, from my wife's perspective, Marju was put on a pedestal at work. All the girls wanted him, and when he focused his attention on her, she was swept away. Hearing this was a hard blow for me. I agree that her decision to sleep with him so quickly calls our marriage into question. She admits that it felt like a fantasy at first. He was charming, but he became more domineering and abusive as the affair progressed. I'm not excusing her actions. She holds herself accountable. She insists that I did nothing wrong. This was her mistake, letting it happen, getting caught up in his manipulation. Will she do it again? Honestly, I don't think she will. After the affair ended, she was a mess. Not in a way that deserved sympathy, but she was broken. She contemplated ending her life more than once. She has openly acknowledged the pain she caused me, her family, and her friends. I think that's why reconciliation has been a bit easier, because of her willingness to take full responsibility. It would have been easy to walk away and hate her, and I did feel that way for a long time. But despite everything, her family and I still love her, and we have to believe that she won't make the same mistake again. Edit 2. I welcome constructive criticism, I expect it. But some people have been downright vile, wishing awful things upon us. It's nonsense. I hope we'll be one of those couples who make it. I know there are no guarantees, but I have to try. I understand parts of what her psychologist said. If I hadn't fought, then Marja would have won. I know some people were triggered by that statement in my previous post, but they need to understand, it was all a game to him, and he was winning. The turning point was my wife. She ended things when he thought he had complete control over her. After that, she did everything she could to atone and rebuild our trust. There were so many moments when I wanted to walk away, to give up, but something in me refused. I couldn't leave. I had to fight for my marriage. Because if I didn't, then yes, Marja would have won. Just to be clear, I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing this for me, for us.